Hi, and welcome to the very first edition of STANcast. It's a very unique new series depicting all kinds of important environmentally historical events. Since this is the first edition of STANcast, we will be covering one of my favorite historical events, the Montreal Protocol. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? I'm talking about this today to show that this was one of the most successful environmental international treaties to date. The Montreal Protocol occurred in 1987 and was held in, you guessed it, Montreal. This was a convention of over 196 different nations coming together to try and make a change in the world. The objective of the Montreal Protocol was to reduce the emissions of harmful ozone-depleting compounds, such as CFCs, that were depleting the layer of ozone in the stratosphere. This is important because the ozone layer protects humans and all living things on Earth from the harsh and deadly UV rays of the sun. CFC stands for chlorofluorocarbons, which were invented in the 1890s by a Belgian chemist named Frederick Schwarz. CFCs were first widely available to the public when they started to be used in refrigerators in 1928 by the United States company GM. This chemical compound was used in place of the previously used ammonia, which was toxic and harmful to humans. CFCs aren't toxic to humans, so it was seen as a technological revolution, a compound that could not only keep our food cold, but not kill us. That was a good thing. CFCs seemed like the ultimate compound. They are non-flammable, odorless, and tasteless. In World War II, their use in DDT propellants saved millions of people from dying of insect-borne diseases. CFCs have a very, very low boiling point, approximately 0 degrees centigrade. This property made it ideal for use in refrigerators, freezers, and also used as fire repellents. All of these appliances and devices emit CFCs into the atmosphere when used. So of course, as it would seem like with most things in life, there is no such thing as a free lunch. The CFCs that were used for almost 100 years in the first world countries that helped the globally dominating countries get to where they are today were actually causing a problem that could not have been foreseen by anyone. Chlorofluorocarbons are in fact very harmful, though not to humans, animals, or even plants. Yet their entire planet is at risk. It was found that CFCs deplete the layer of O3 in our stratosphere, oxygen 3 otherwise called. This layer is more commonly known as the ozone layer. The ozone layer protects all living things on the planet from the deadly ultraviolet radiation that the sun produces. Without this protective layer surrounding the Earth, it would have been impossible for life forms to evolve to the level that humans are currently at today. Chlorofluorocarbons contain 3 basic chemicals: chlorine, carbon, and fluorine. They are a stable compound normally, though once they reach the stratosphere and are hit with the UV rays from the sun, the chlorine molecules begin to break off. As you can see, this diagram depicts the process that occurs when CFCs are in the stratosphere. Once the chlorine molecule breaks away from the compound, it rams into O3 molecules and takes away a single oxygen molecule. This then forms what's known as chlorine monoxide and leaves an ordinary O2 molecule from what used to be an O3. From this state, any free oxygen molecules that are flying around that hit a chlorine monoxide compound will break off the chlorine yet again and form another O2 molecule. This leaves the chlorine molecule free to roam around and destroy countless more O3 molecules. This may not seem like a huge problem, because the ozone layer is a naturally reoccurring layer in the atmosphere, so it's rebuilding itself as it's being destroyed. The real issue lies in the amount of destruction that a single chlorine molecule can cause. A single molecule can destroy anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 O3 molecules before it dissipates, either by falling into the troposphere or by combining with other chemicals. Oh, and don't forget that there are 3 chlorine molecules for every CFC compound released in the atmosphere. Try and calculate in your head how many O3 molecules will be turned into O2 molecules if, say, 250,000 CFC compounds were released into the atmosphere. That might take you a while. With all of this research and evidence showing the harm that CFCs cause, It's no wonder that such drastic measures needed to be put into place. The majority of the research done on CFCs took place in the late 90s and early 80s. Once the threat of CFCs to our atmosphere became public, the initial response was, why should the public care, and how does it negatively affect people? There was one word that got everyone on the same side when it came to banning the use of CFCs. That word is cancer. Rises in skin cancer would have been drastic and directly related to the increase of UV rays that got through the stratosphere and to the surface of the Earth. Knowing this, the Montreal Protocol wanted to get the ball rolling on banning the substance as soon as possible, but it also had to be feasible and realistic. There are many different rules and regulations that were enacted. The first was the distinction of the two different groups of ozone depleting compounds. Group 1 contained all of the fully halogenated CFCs. The second group only contained the halons, which were a more primitive form of the compound. There were also less restricted regulations placed on developing countries. The convention recognized that these compounds were essential in the development of technology for a country and greatly improved the quality of living. The restrictions that the Montreal Protocol implemented were essentially an attempt to completely stop the production and use of CFCs in a reasonable manner. The developing countries were allowed a longer time to reduce their emissions than the first world countries. These reasonable requests are part of the reason why the Montreal Protocol was such a success. For example, the developed countries had until the year 1989 to freeze their annual production and consumption at their 1986 levels, whereas the developing countries had the same production and consumption restrictions. It was that their timescale was increased. They had until 1999 to freeze their 1986 levels of emissions. The objective of the Montreal Protocol was to have all developed countries completely stop their CFC consumption by 2010. Perhaps one of the most inspirational examples of compliance to the Montreal Protocol was provided by the small country of Jamaica. They set out an ambitious goal for themselves. The Jamaican government wanted to be completely CFC free by the end of 2005. That's 5 years before the deadline. And Jamaica took this seriously. They set up 2 different governmental programs to ensure that their goals could be met. The plans went hand in hand. The first one was called the Jamaica Refrigerant Management Plan, also known as the RMP. The second plan was called the Terminal Phase-Out Management Plan, also known as TPMP. These plans together worked to ensure that Jamaica would reach their goal. Jamaica's main focus was on their top emitters of CFC, refrigerators and air conditioners. The government implemented new codes and regulations to ensure that all fridges and ACs technicians knew about CFCs and how to handle and recycle them properly. These protocols and procedures were then shared with all of the neighboring English-speaking Caribbean nations. They also retrained all of their customs staff to ensure that no polluting products were entering the country. This was done with the help of a UNEP training manual, and it was also directly assisted by Canada and Finland. All these efforts by the Jamaican government paid off in the end, because as of December 31st, 2005, Jamaica was officially declared CFC free, becoming the first country in Latin America and the Caribbean to stop consuming any CFC. So in conclusion, since the Montreal Protocol was enacted, the participating developed countries have cut CFC consumption by 95% and reduced approximately 11 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions. I would say these results speak for themselves and go to show that when nations come together behind a common cause, anything can be accomplished. The Montreal Protocol is a great example of one of the most successful international treaties involving the environment to date. Well, that's it for the first edition of STANcast, folks. Hope you enjoyed it and came to the same realization I did. History is not only educational, it's really fun.